the coming period, because this is precisely the sort of military adventure which potentially the Irish government could involve us in the future if we dismantle some of the few safeguards that exist to protect us from getting involved in the warmongering of big imperial powers. So, we will be obviously further underlying the need to mobilise opposition, and the anti-war movement will be doing that, both against US-Israeli aggression in the Middle East, but also against the efforts of this government to dismantle our neutrality by taking away the triple lock. Lastly, just to mention the energy cost issue. I mean, we heard in the last week or two 320,000 people in arrears because of profiteering by the energy companies, making an absolute fortune on the back of the energy poverty and misery of huge numbers of people in this country. That is now going to worsen as a result of the American-Israeli military aggression. It is worsening. So we will be reiterating our call for action by the government to prevent people being further driven into poverty by the hikes and the profiteering in energy and fuel prices. We think at an absolute minimum there should be an energy credit brought in to alleviate the hardship that people are suffering, as well as something we've been proposing for some time, that there should be energy price caps to stop the energy companies actually price gouging in this way and inflicting more hardship and misery on ordinary, hard-pressed working class people in this country. Very finally, just to mention, our algorithms bill will be in the Dáil in our private members' time tomorrow. Paul is, as one of the main instigators of it, will probably say more about it, but we have yet to hear from the government what their attitude is, and it'll be again indicative of whether this government is willing to stand up to the big tech, who are profiteering off the production of toxic, dangerous child abuse imagery, sexual abuse imagery, and other divisive and toxic content.
Yes, so just to add to that, the Solidarity's condemnation of the attack by the US and Israel on Iran. And I think it's shameful that Helen McEntee, that the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach don't seem to know whether this is an illegal attack or not. We should mention they haven't said a word about 165 people killed in an attack on a school in South Iran, including possibly up to 100 young girls. They don't know if that's illegal. They haven't found their voice since this happened. The Irish state has taken a supportive stance in relation to the ICJ finding that Israel is a genocidal state. It's jointly involved in this attack. It's probably led this attack on Iran, and yet the Irish government, which is meant to be neutral, is silent. And I think that really is shameful. And I think we should again say that Micheál Martin is going to go and meet the instigator of this vicious assault on Iran. And once again to say, like, I've been on marches in support of the Women Life Freedom movement, a few years ago. And the idea that this will do anything to support the pro-democracy movement or women's rights in Iran is obviously laughable, considering that Donald Trump is a misogynist, convicted sex offender, doing this to hide from the Epstein files. And it actually has no support even within the US, but still the government cannot find its voice. I want to also just say that next Sunday is International Women's Day, and organisations, women, students, trade unions, survivors of gender-based violence will be marching and gathering at 1 o'clock at City Hall in Dublin. And I think it's a really important time because women's rights are clearly under attack all around the world. And to mention two issues, it was harrowing listening this morning to a woman talking about her experience of, yet again, another couple being sent abroad from this country for a medical termination. That woman could have died. And I'd raise two questions: why we don't seem to have abortion for even health reasons in this country, even though it's meant to exist. The woman was bleeding, could have died, and was only saved in Liverpool. But also just the fact that cowardly politicians made a decision at the time of the lead up to repeal that they would make a distinction not made in other countries between fatal and severe abnormalities. And that is why, again and again and again, people are having to travel for medical reasons. And maybe some of the TDs who stuck their hands up to vote down the bill that Bree Smith put in the last Dáil might reconsider that it should have allowed an airing of this for further debate, because it was one of the issues that was in it. I also want to say that I will be marching tomorrow in UCD in support of survivors, and particularly the young medical student who was raped by another student, which has really caught, thankfully, the attention now of so many people, not just in UCD but nationwide, who will be gathering to say that UCD needs to look at its policies. It needs to look at how it has basically led to a situation where a young medical student was raped. She'd image-based sexual abuse used against her. She appealed to be able to resit her exams because she needed a termination from being raped and being pregnant. And they refused that. She ended up going to court. She lost that case. And UCD are coming looking for costs against that student. I think they need to reevaluate what they're doing. In the cold light of day, the only person who suffered as a result of that rape is the rape victim. The person who carried out that rape is still continuing his medical studies, which is actually very, very worrying. If I was a UCD administrator, I'd be trying to root out that person, even if she didn't report the rape and chose not to, and I can understand why, because most people don't. I would be trying to find out who shared those images, who made those misogynistic comments, because they're very dangerous people and they shouldn't be let near any patients, never mind women. So I'm hoping that there will be a huge turnout. I believe that there will. And again, would appeal to people to come and march on International Women's Day as well, with women all around the world and allies all around the world as well.
Just focus on our bill, which will be debated tomorrow and voted on tomorrow, to turn off the toxic recommender algorithms used by the social media companies. We haven't heard yet what the government's attitude to the bill is going to be, but this is really a test for them. I mean, Simon Harris told the Sunday Business Post when talking about regulating big tech that some things are more important than money. Well, now the question is, are they going to put their money where their mouth is, or are they going to continue to bow down before the big tech social media giants and allow them to continue to force feed toxic content to young people and to adults? What's contained in our bill is what is recommended by all of the experts who have examined this area. It's contained in the recommendation, the first interim report of the AI committee. It was agreed on a cross-party basis. It's something that Fianna Fáil TDs have previously called for. It's called for by the ICCL, called for by the National Youth Council. It's backed up by multiple expert studies. And what it is to turn off this force feeding of toxic material to young people. If you go into a shop today and buy a new mobile phone and create a new social media account on any of the social media platforms, and you describe yourself as a young woman, 16-year-old, 17-year-old young woman, within half an hour, you're going to be fed content that promotes eating disorders. If you search for anything to do with dieting, well then within an hour or so, the majority of what you're being fed on your social media platform is going to be material that is promoting eating disorders. Meta makes over $200 million a year from posts that promote eating disorders. And if you put in to this blank phone that you're a young man, you don't look at any content, you don't like any content, within half an hour again, you're going to be fed toxic, misogynistic content, of like a often very, very violent nature. And what's happening is that our young people are being fed this material without any choice on their behalf. Like this is the basic point. I saw some people suggesting they were opposed to this bill because it amounted to censorship. There's no censorship involved whatsoever here. People would still be free to go and look up online the self-harm content that is fed to people, the eating disorder content that is fed to people, the misogynistic content that is out there. Our bill wouldn't have any impact on the ability of people to publish and have whatever material online and social media or elsewhere. But what it would do is to stop the social media giants force feeding it to all of us. And in particular, the damage that this is doing in terms of mental health, physical health of young people is quite horrendous. So this is about freeing people from an algorithm that is choosing what we see and returning social media to what it was kind of sold to us as a space to connect with our friends and so on. This is the answer. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we saw the government, leaks from the government suggesting they were going to take big action by banning under 16s. I wasn't surprised then when it emerged, they weren't actually going to do that. I thought it was just trying to look as if they were doing something very, very substantial and very, very radical, because obviously parents in particular are concerned about the impact that social media is having on young people. So I wasn't surprised that they didn't do it, but in any case, that isn't the answer. That's the equivalent of putting a little sign up in front of a park which has dangerous or antisocial behaviour happening inside of it, saying children not allowed in here. The children can continue to hop over the wall and go into the park, but the government washes its hands of it and says, well, nothing to do with us. We've said the children can't be there, and the rest of us have to suffer this happening in our public spaces, which is effectively what social media should be. So instead, this is the answer. We need to turn off the toxic algorithms, and we'll see how the government responds to it.
Richard, do you think that Iran should agree to an unconditional ceasefire because they can't win militarily, in the same way you argued that Ukraine should have done the same in the Russian context?
There's no ceasefire on the table. There's no ceasefire on the table if the United States and Israel are attacking them. And what we can understand through the fog of war propaganda, there was actually negotiations going on. And apparently a deal had nearly been reached. And the United States and Israel just decided to the United States were engaged in those, just pull out and attack them. So, I'm sure, I can't speak for the Iranian regime, but I don't think the Iranian regime will be doing anything at all were it not for the fact that they've been attacked by the United States and Israel in what is a flagrant breach of international law. It's an absolutely naked instance of imperialism and warmongering. So if the United States and Israel stop, I'm sure there would be no particular reason for the Iranians to continue.
Which wasn't that the same in Ukraine? Russia kept firing. You were saying that they were wrong to keep fighting because they could never militarily win. Is that not the same situation we find ourselves in here?
I think you're making an argument for why the Iranians should continue to resist.
No,
that's what you're actually doing, right? I absolutely defended the right of the Ukrainian people.
Not the army, though.
To resist. No, we did.
No, you didn't. You made
now, Craig, hold on. You may have your opinions on this, but I know what I said, and we absolutely were clear. The Ukrainian people did have, and still have, the right to resist the invasion of their country. What we said is that this country should not be involved in militarily supporting it, and we didn't trust NATO and their agenda. We do not believe that a military alliance dominated by the United States, who are up to their neck in the genocide in Palestine, or Britain or other imperial powers, had the interests of Ukrainian people or self-determination or anything like it at heart in their involvement in that conflict. That's what we said, right? So we are not for aligning with the NATO military alliance, because we also think they're an imperialist alliance. And we are seeing a demonstration of the imperialism of the United States, the biggest power in NATO, in Iran at the moment, in setting the entire region on fire in a flagrant breach of international law, where Hegseth is saying things like, we'll have no rules of engagement whatsoever. This is chilling stuff, right? They're saying we're going to commit war crimes. After arming and supporting a genocide in Gaza, being in the dock for genocide and for war crimes and crimes against humanity. So they should stop. And I can't believe, quite frankly, that anybody would say anything else in the face of this aggression than that this is warmongering by the United States. So they should stop it.
There was a celebration of the current Iranian regime in a Dublin hotel last month. Should that have taken place, and what were your views on that?
I'm not a supporter of the Iranian regime. I think it's a repressive regime. And I think their repression of people protesting for women's rights and for greater democracy is brutal and unjustified. But that's a matter for the Iranian people. I mean, to give you another example, I think the Saudi regime is even more brutal, even more autocratic, even more savage and undemocratic than the Iranian regime, I don't think we should go and bomb Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates.
What do you think of the Iranians who are celebrating the death of the...
I think it's very, very misguided of anybody to believe the United States or Israel's attack on Iran is motivated by a desire to bring about democratic reform, freedom, or self-determination from the Iranian people. In fact, the whole history of US intervention in Iran, going right back to the 1950s, is to stop democracy. I believe, in fact, what the United States and Israel want in Iran is a failed state. They want to do what they did to Libya, and Craig, you mightn't have been around then, I don't know, but I was the chairperson, one of the main organisers of the big protests in Dublin back in 2003, when we had similar spurious justifications about weapons of mass destruction, about taking out a dictator in Iraq, and the consequence was 1 million people slaughtered directly and indirectly, millions displaced, and the destabilisation of the entire regime. So I don't want to see that repeated. And I think anybody who's got eyes to see should oppose what is a naked, brutal, unjustified act of military aggression.
On the same point, military escalation, you said previously that you're opposed to military escalation. In that sense, do you condemn the attacks by Iran on various states in the region?
I don't want to see any escalation, but the instigators are clear. The instigators are clear. The United States and Israel have instigated this by their own admission in the interest of regime change. So it's hardly surprising that the Iranians are going to respond to that.
You condemn it?
I condemn the people who are responsible for instigating this, right? It is inevitable. Just in the same way as it was... Hold on, Craig. Hold on, Craig. It was just as it was inevitable that the Ukrainians were going to resist Putin. It's inevitable the Iranians are going to resist the United States. Right? And I was quite clear in condemning the military aggression of Putin, and I'm quite clear about condemning the military aggression of Israel and the United States.
Was it right for Iran to escalate?
Listen, it's just, war is a horrible thing. I'm against war, right? I'm against militarism. But if the United States and Israel launch a war, it is not terribly surprising that the people they launch it against decide to defend themselves and do other things that could claim innocent lives, right? So I want this to stop. But the people who have that power are the Americans and the Israelis, and indeed European powers who should speak out. They should deny the United States any support in conducting this war, and they should impose sanctions on the criminal regime in Israel that has committed a genocide, is engaged in ongoing ethnic cleansing, and is now complicit in this